Hey everyone, welcome to thelines.com. My name's Nicole, and in today's video, we are talking Formula One and the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix happening in Italy. But before we dive into the sprint format and handicapping and analysis on this race, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, give us a thumbs up, and ring the bell so you know every time we post a new video. There's a lot to take in when it comes to the race this weekend because first and foremost, it's going to be the first of 3 sprint formats we will see on the F1 calendar this year. Not only will it be a sprint format, but there will also be different rules than what we saw in sprint formats last year, and the schedule is going to look a little bit different than what we are used to. So let's get into all of that. The way that the schedule is going to break down is Friday, you are going to have an hour of practice before a qualifying session. That qualifying session is going to determine pole position and the grid for Saturday's sprint race, which will have another practice session before it. Then how the drivers perform in the sprint race will determine the grid for Sunday's race. Now, last year in the sprint race, you had the top 3 drivers taking home additional points over the weekend, but this year it will be the top 8 drivers, with P1 getting 8 points and P8 getting 1 point. This should incentivize the drivers to give it a little bit more effort in the sprint race, which is about 25 to 30 minutes, and then we will have our traditional race on Sunday. But it is a great opportunity for drivers to earn some additional points over the weekend in addition to the ones that they can earn for obviously finishing in the top 10 in the race or securing the fastest lap. Now, if we take a look at the odds for the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix, it should come as no surprise that Charles Leclerc is at the top of the odds boards. He has plus 105 at DraftKings Sportsbook and plus 120 at FanDuel and BetMGM Sportsbook. So what we have seen so far is that Ferrari has decided they are not going to upgrade their car for Emilia Romagna. They are going to keep the car the same as it is. Now, that might not be too big of an issue because the cars looked pretty damn good so far. But their team principal has come out and said he just doesn't feel comfortable upgrading a car, only having 1 hour of practice on Friday. He just doesn't feel that that is enough time to analyze and test the upgrades and see how they are affecting the car. Now, many fans thought that the time between Australia and Italy would have been the perfect time for teams like Mercedes to add upgrades to their car because they have 2 weeks off and they wouldn't be rushed like in during some of the schedule when we only have a week in between races. But Toto Wolff has come out and said that he is not upgrading the cars in time for Italy as well. But his reason was a little bit different. He just said that Mercedes has not been able to figure out the underlying issues that they've had with this car. They've had reliability issues. They're still dealing with porpoising. We saw that Lewis Hamilton had to slow his car down due to overheating in Australia. Mercedes hasn't figured out the root cause of these problems yet, and Toto Wolff feels that adding upgrades on top of that would just confuse the engineers. They wouldn't know going forward if it were the upgrades affecting the car or if it were the problems that they have been dealing with from the beginning of the season. But we know that Mercedes is not the only team dealing with reliability issues. Red Bull has been plagued with them as well. The fact that Max Verstappen has not finished 2 out of the first 3 races this season is pretty much unheard of. So when you take a look at all of the stuff that's going on and you take a look at reliability and speed and performance, it's really not a surprise that Charles Leclerc is at the top of the odds boards here, especially after what he did in Australia. But what I want to focus on for this race is the middle of the pack. Charles Leclerc has really been setting himself apart in some of these races, but we still have a lot of battling going on in the middle of the pack with teams like McLaren and Alpine. Now, McLaren capitalized on every single chance that they got in Australia. And as a McLaren fan, it was great to watch. Both Ricciardo and Norris got into Q3 in qualifying. They finished top 6 in the race. It seemed like a totally different car than what we've seen since the beginning of the season. But unfortunately, Norris isn't convinced that it's the car and isn't convinced that the team's success is going to continue, which is disheartening to hear. He credited almost all of the success that McLaren saw in Australia due to the track itself and the car's suitability to that track. He said that McLaren maybe got a little bit more performance out of the car, but 80% of it came from the track itself, and that essentially it's the same car that we've seen since the beginning of the season. Now, with that in perspective, the track in Italy is more similar to what we saw at Bahrain. And McLaren did not finish very well in Bahrain. The car was not suited well to that track. So That's something to keep in mind when you're handicapping this race. Now, if we take a look at another car that's in the middle of the pack, specifically Alpine, Alpine really had the opposite experience of what McLaren had in Australia. They looked phenomenal, but just weren't able to capitalize on the early successes that they saw, especially especially for Fernando Alonso. He was fast during qualifying. Actually, he came out and said that he felt that the car speed in qualifying would have put him in contention for pole position, but unfortunately, he spun out in turn 11, ending his impressive lap time during qualifying early and disqualifying him from getting that pole position. He started the race on Sunday in P10, which would have left him in the points if he would have been able to stay there, but he got unlucky behind a safety car, and things just really seemed to unravel for Alpine. But honestly, Ocon has been performing quite well, and the car has the speed. And you have to remember that Alonso is a championship winning driver. So if Alpine can get this reliability issue under control, and from what it seems, it is minor reliability issues, the speed is there for Alpine. And that is why I am taking Fernando Alonso minus 125 versus Norris in a head-to-head at BetMGM Sportsbook. Yes, it was exciting to see that McLaren was back in the points and performing and being a top 6 car. But hearing Norris say that it's not the car itself, it's not upgrades, it was just the track, you have to take that into consideration. And it is hard to ignore Alpine's speed heading into Italy. The car has dealt with reliability issues. They haven't been major. And I don't think that the track in Imola is going to favor the McLaren like the track in Melbourne did. So that is why I think Alonso is going to break through here and beat Norris in this head-to-head matchup. Before I sign off, there are a few other things that you've got to keep in mind if you are handicapping this race at home, and one of them is going to be weather. This is going to be the first time in this season that weather and rain specifically is going to play a factor. Now, we know during practice and qualifying on Friday, there is a very high chance of rain. Those chances go down on Saturday and down further on Sunday. But if it does rain on Sunday, that is going to slow down the car's speed and potentially bunch them together. So that is something to keep in mind. You also can't forget that there is a sprint race in the middle of qualifying and the race. If cars get damaged during the sprint race, it doesn't give their teams a lot of time to fix them come Sunday. So there are a lot of things to keep in mind when we are taking a look at the first sprint race of the season and looking at the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. As always, do your research and bet responsibly. I will see you next time.